the downtown merchants, the downtown people.
Sure.
Have you know the talk?
The one.
It's right across the street from Rick Calvert. And go there. So it's
Yes.
kind of cool.
Yeah. meeting follow-up. Pro Tem's city manager.
Your Honor, members of council, it's a pleasure to be here tonight in the capacity of acting city manager for our meeting. And for the meeting follow-up, I don't believe that we have any items on.
Does anybody have anything?
No.
All right, well, let's move on to the LGBTQ Advisory Board update.
In February of 2020, the Casper City Council authorized the establishment of our LGBTQ Advisory Committee in an effort to gain valuable insights and perspectives from that community here in Casper. And so tonight, a few members of that group are here with us to give council a summary of their initiatives and progress over the past few years. So if it pleases the council, we will turn the time over to them.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you guys so much for having us here. My name is Dave Esposito. I am currently the chairperson of the LGBTQ Advisory Committee for Council, and this is my co-chair, Alex Petrino. And so we just want to update you on what we've been doing. And so we do have our current members, here we go, that we've had for the last couple of years. And then we do have some new members that we brought on as of this month. Well, actually we have Elliot here with us, but the others were not able to attend, unfortunately. We have our council representatives, Amber Pollock and Jai Sutherland. And then we have our liaisons, Christy Baer from the Natrona County School District, Sergeant Stadelli from the Police Department, and Heidi Rude from the City of Casper. All right, so just some recent accomplishments that we've made with our non-discrimination, well, the non-discrimination ordinance that was passed. We've increased the visibility of that on the city's website. So now it is on the bottom of each web page throughout the city. We have our continued partnerships with Casper College, one of our committee members named Daryl, and the Police Department with Sergeant Stadelli and the Natrona County School District. And then we do have our partnerships with Casper Pride, and we're going to discuss the Casper Cares program that we've been working on. Alex will discuss that here in just a little bit. And then I wanted to talk about the Pride survey that we are in partnership with Wooler Hall Research on. So we collected a bunch of data from people at Casper Pride this summer, and we got a lot of good data, but right now it is just in raw form. So we don't have that completely aggregated and organized into the best things, but I do have some data points that I want to share with you guys that I thought would be pretty enlightening. So the survey itself had a total of 144 participants. They were from the state of, pretty much from all the state of Wyoming. Okay. Out of those participants, 68 or 47% were from Natrona County, and 61 were from the city of Casper. Out of the 144 participants, we had 37 or 26% identify as male, 46 or 32% identify as female, 5% identified as transgender male, another 5% as transgender female, 12% as gender queer, 15% as gender non-binary, and 6% as other or another category. As far as sexual orientation goes, so the question was asked, which of the following best described your sexual orientation? 27% were gay or homosexual, 31% were bisexual, 1% were straight or a heterosexual or identified themselves as an ally, 13% were queer, 16% identify as pansexual, 6% asexual, 2% unsure or questioning, and 4% another category not listed. So as far as how LGBTQ people in Wyoming meet other LGBTQ people for the first time, 32% of those participants said that they meet at a coffee shop, 20% at bars and clubs, 66% online, 33% at somebody's house, 10% at a restaurant, 60% at an event such as a concert, movie, play, live theater, or music, and 10% at other physical venues, and then 19% somewhere else not listed. We had a couple questions involving how the LGBTQ community here in Wyoming feels safe, whether or not they feel safe. So the question was asked, in the last 12 months, have you ever felt unsafe when going out in public anywhere in Wyoming? 63% said yes, and 38% said no. Narrowing that down a little bit, looking at treatment by strangers, the question was asked, in the last 12 months, have you ever felt you've been treated differently by strangers or acquaintances in public anywhere in Wyoming because they thought that you were a member of the LGBTQ plus community? 64% said yes, and 36% said no. In terms of harassment, the question was asked, in the last 12 months, have you ever been harassed in public anywhere in Wyoming? This one is a little bit more positive. So 43% said yes, but 57% said no, which I thought was pretty enlightening and good to hear. And then finally, the last data point I want to share is on the non-discrimination ordinance and whether or not people in the city of Casper are aware that that ordinance had been passed. So it was asked, in 2022, the Casper City Council passed a non-discrimination ordinance. It then described the ordinance and asked, have you heard of this ordinance? Out of the 61 participants from Casper, 31 or 51% said yes, and 30 or 49% said no. So those were just some data points I wanted to share with you guys. We are still working with Waller Hall to aggregate, organize the data. And once we get that done, we will be happy to pass that on and give you guys a little bit more insight into what that survey reveals. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Alex.
We presented last October to everyone about the Municipal Equality Index and our scorecard that came, and you can pull up our past scorecard on the HRC website. But we wanted to kind of give a little update on kind of where we currently stand with that. 2023 scores, you can see up on the screen kind of some of that historical data. We're waiting on our 2024 score. Likely it's going to be similar to our 2023. We should have that score by the end of the year. So where we kind of currently sit, so we do have a representative from HRC that communicates directly with Heidi on city business and kind of working to increase that score potential. So the scorecard itself has some flex points that can be earned annually, but also like just kind of overall too. Some of them are a one-time point, some of them can flex from year to year. And so our ask of City Council at some point is to kind of look at these categories of flex points and see where council feels like it is most appropriate for the city to potentially like increase those scores or do some of those things. There's some of them that probably aren't going to apply to the city because some of them, like the last one, city test limit on restrictive state law, that's not necessarily happening yet in Wyoming. So that might not be points we would ever be able to get. And some of these categories are similar. So we welcome feedback kind of as we go forward on which one City Council feels like are the most attainable to start pursuing. And then we will look at kind of what we need to do more specifically to start pursuing those. And then Casper Cares is the other piece to kind of update everyone on. So after kind of like sitting with this for a long time and having lots of conversations with Jolene in the PR department for the city and legal and HR and having these conversations of like what can we do as a committee and what's going to like get the most information out there, but in a way that doesn't create a lot of red tape for us and for the city and these pieces. So kind of what we decided to do is we had a conversation with Casper Pride on using their database of individuals already in their email system and their marketing system and work with them on sharing information about the non-discrimination ordinance, what the city is doing, how to report a hate crime or how to report if they feel like they have been discriminated against, as well as other information that the city is doing to help protect the LGBTQ plus community. We kind of figured that was the best way to, they already have a database of information. We aren't sending out our own emails and correspondence that have to go through marketing, legal, all of those things, and felt like that was the best way to go about that. So we will continue to do that, or we'll start doing that and doing it on a quarterly basis where we will start by sharing more information about the non-discrimination ordinance, starting to share these things as like kind of like a did you know campaign in partnership with Casper Pride and hopefully PFLAG as well once we have further conversations with them. And that's it for our updates. So what questions do you have? And we're happy to answer any that we can.
Anyone have any questions? Does not look like we have any questions. Oh, wait, sorry.
I will.
Go ahead. Counselor Slater.
Thanks. Thanks you guys for coming in and giving this presentation. I've been hearing about it, so I don't have a lot of questions, other than the slide that has the flex points on there. I think that that's really valuable information for the city in terms of tangible steps that we could take to make sure that we're doing everything we can. As far as meeting the, our goals for the equality index score, and more importantly, actually doing the work to protect our LGBTQ community. So I don't know, I mean, it's not really a question, but I don't want to lose track of this. And so I don't know whether it's something that we could implement like on the committee where we, set up meetings to make sure that we're revisiting this with the city, or if we put it on a work session. But I feel like we shouldn't just see that and then forget about it. I feel like we should do something where we can. So I don't know if maybe my question is either we put it on a work session to visit this and actually figure out what options we have for making change, or maybe that's something that we could add to the committee's agenda in terms of specific asks that we would want to come back to the city with that are more specific, or yeah, I don't know. The main point is how do we not let this just vanish, I guess.
Agreed. I think both are options for sure, and further conversations as we've gotten more data from HRC in like the recent months. I think it's giving us a little bit more direction, and so we have some more specific things that we can start to look at. So happy to like bring it into our meetings, and also like have it back in a work session too. And when we come back to present on our like the aggregate data from our research from Waller Hall to come back anytime.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, maybe what we could do is talk about it in our monthly meetings, and then we could just put it on the work session, kind of like not scheduled, but like to be discussed agenda once there's more action available.
Sounds great.
Okay,
Thank you.
Counselor Khan.
Yeah, I think that would be the most helpful, is if the advisory committee would maybe winnow this list down to some 2 or 3 recommendations, and you'll have a chance to look at the data once it's been aggregated and tabulated. So that would be my preference, is to have a recommendation from the committee and then bring it to a work session to kind of talk about actionable steps and so forth.
Perfect.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for this index to be published for this year. So once that happens, we can also present on what the official scores are for Casper, and then we can narrow down some specific points that we think could use some looking at.
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, I do think that I agree with Counselor Bond that narrowing this down a little bit and then bringing it to a work session might be easier for us to work through.
Sure.
So is there any other comments? Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Having us and supporting us.
Okay, moving on. So we're gonna do the council goal update for Casper for city facility maintenance and capital planning.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem. So this is another opportunity the city staff is taking to give you an update on your important council goals. And so I will be presenting as the head of facility maintenance for the city from this seat. Of course, Tom Brower, our Chief Operating Officer, is also here to help me field any questions that you all may have. So in June of 2022, we did complete a facility condition assessment. In that assessment, 127 total buildings were surveyed, and 33 of what we considered at that time of our primary facilities were given an extra level of attention in the form of narrative reports. So reports that were provided specifically in more detail for those 33 facilities. As part of that assessment, we received a facility condition index. for those facilities, which was calculated using the expired system replacement cost divided by the cost to replace the building. And so we like that facility condition index as kind of an easy data point that we can point to understand where the priorities may lie, because of course that facility condition index took into account the age of the building, the age of the systems within the building, anything that had been replaced that we had record of, and maintenance data related to that facility. So it was a good starting point for us in terms of really diving into the condition of all of the city facilities. With that facility condition index, a score of less than 20 was great, indicates that the building is in pretty good shape. A score over 50 indicated that a significant renovation or replacement of that building should be considered. Okay. So at the time in June of 2022, where we were pleased to see that no buildings were at that 50 threshold or benchmark. But as they forecasted out to 2027 and systems continued to age, the caveat was that if we invested no more in those buildings between 2022 and 2027, that 6 buildings would actually meet that threshold by 2027. And so fast forward a little bit in advance of one set number 17 and the budgeting that you all had to do with those funds, staff evaluated the data even further. And we really broke it down by major building systems. We assumed that only portions of the systems after further assessment would need to be replaced, not entire systems. And we tried to present to you something that felt a little bit more manageable in terms of a budget that you could consider for facility maintenance out of one set number 17. And graciously, you awarded $5.4 million dedicated solely to public building improvements through that one set number 17 cycle. In addition to that, you said this is an important enough endeavor that we want to establish a council goal for the years 2023 to 2025. And so we did that, worked with staff, and we identified some primary tasks. So the first thing was to update our apps APPS program. So that was a program that was provided as part of the facility condition assessment. It's a software that we maintain, and it is the way that we manage the assets within all of the facilities. And so making sure that that data was accurate to start with, because there were some identified items that were incorrect because the consultant didn't have the right data at the right time. And then in addition to that, making sure that we are keeping that database updated when we make improvements, such as complete replacement of the HVAC at City Hall, for instance. So making sure that we continue to update that apps database is going to be really important. The benefit to us in doing that is that it will update the facility condition index score for us automatically, as long as we're keeping that data updated. And so we can continue to use the score from today and 5 years from now as a way to plan into the future. The next task as part of your council goals was for staff to develop preventative maintenance programs and standard operating procedures, or SOPs, for some of our major building systems, and particularly some of the more complex systems, or the systems that maybe have a more critical result if they were to fail. And so staff has been actively working on that, and we expect to have that updated by the end of June 2025 for the council obligations. In addition, we want to assess and create a strategic plan for further evaluation of key building systems, such as water distribution, sewer, electrical, and HVAC. So we understand that during the facility condition assessment, they were not tearing into walls. They were not doing invasive inspections of these assets. They simply took the life expectancy of the asset and the age of the building and said, okay, it's reached its age life expectancy, and now we need to replace it. Well, we know that that's not always the case. So we need to do some further evaluation. And so with some of the funds that you all committed, we will be purchasing sewer inspection equipment, and we will be hiring consultants or contractors to help us with some additional investigation. And that could include airflow monitoring, water flow monitoring. These sorts of tests will help us determine if systems are distributing the amount of air or water that they were designed to, and if there's not, that signifies that there's a problem that we need to further evaluate or some repairs that need to happen. So we are developing those plans. We're identifying the vendors that can help us with that, and that will be something else that's completed by the end of the fiscal year for your benefit. And then the last thing is to use all of this data that we've compiled for capital planning. And so for the bulk of the presentation tonight, we did want to discuss the tool that we intend to use for capital planning moving forward. So while the facility condition assessment did provide an FCI score that we feel is really valuable, there are also some considerations that we need to make to help us prioritize where we're putting capital dollars. Because the reality is not all buildings are created equal. Some of them serve a very critical function in our organization. Some of them make us lose sleep at night because we know that there are systems that are challenging or failing. And so we wanted to consider both of those things in addition to the facility condition index score that was provided by the assessment. So what you see on screen now is a fairly simple database that we created, but we think it's going to be an excellent tool. And of course, we are eliciting some feedback from you all tonight if you'd like to see something different or modified. So we start out, and right now it's filtered by the 2022 FCI score, or will be shortly. So this is where we started when the facility condition assessment was completed in 2022. Again, you can see, so we did highlight by color. Anything that is under that benchmark of 20 is green, good condition. Anything that's over that benchmark number of 50 is in red. That's concerning. Anything in that orange color is, in that intermediate space where we will start looking at some investments that need to be made, but nothing too concerning at this point. So again, in 2022, we didn't have any buildings that met that 50 threshold. But you'll note Metro, Animal Shelter, Fire Station 1, Marion Kreiner Pool, and Service Center ranked among the highest in terms of systems within those buildings that had already aged out or were going to age out in the very near future. So then if you look at the 2027 FCI score, it shows those 6 facilities that were identified in our report in 2022 as having some significant concerns or needing some significant investment by the year 2027. Those were Metro, Animal Shelter, Fire Station 1, Marion Kreiner Pool, our Casper Service Center, and the Ford Wyoming Center. So again, great starting points, but then we want to determine internally, how do we prioritize beyond just what the need for the building might be? And so we assigned some values to the function that building plays in essential city operations. And so 1 being low, 3 being high. Essentially, we said, okay, if it is an asset or an amenity that is duplicative, so there's some redundancy built in, then it's probably a 1. If it is, for instance, a rec asset, something that's not like public safety sensitive, but there's only one that exists in the community, and so people would feel it significantly if it were gone, that was a 2. If it was related to public safety or other essential city operations, such as fleet maintenance, which supports all the public safety activities, or city hall, which of course creates some critical functions, then it was ranked as a 3. Okay, so that helps to weight how we prioritize the dollars. In addition, we're looking at the maintenance or history concern, with what Tom refers to as it keeps us up at night number. So my BAS team, my buildings and structures team that performs facility maintenance, this is their insight through both our work order system, but also through just what they know in being out working on facilities day in and day out, that hey, these particular buildings or these systems within these particular buildings are concerning for us. And so we want to ensure that that is captured somewhere in addition to just the FCI, which primarily focuses on the age of the system. So when we apply all of those factors, then we have modified scores for 22, and 27. And that is how we intend to help drive our capital planning. So if you filter, I think it's filtered now through 22, right? Okay. So the modified 2022 score, interestingly, still shows that those those four same priority facilities that were originally identified. But you can see that the modified score for 2027 does change things just slightly. And so we feel by applying these other factors that are important in helping us prioritize, we can direct those dollars appropriately and give you capital projects to consider that are really spending those dollars. With that, I would entertain any questions that you might have or any direction that you might have regarding this tool or how we can use it.
Questions? Councilor Campbell?
Thank you. Interim Mayor, Program Mayor. Thanks for the information. No questions at the moment, but I really love the outcome of what effort you guys have put into it so far. This to me feels a lot more objective, and I feel a lot more confident in kind of using a tool like this to implement repairs. And so I just wanted to thank everyone for all the work. I think it's really it was a really good idea to consider redundancies and stuff like that. And so yeah, no questions at the moment, but just wanted to thank you all for all the work, because I think this is going to be super helpful in informing maintenance over the next 5-10 years.
Thank you. Yeah, when I first got on council and was asked to consider a capital agenda, I felt like this was the thing that I wanted to have at my disposal to be able to consider that agenda. So I think this will be super helpful. I'm curious in terms of maintaining and updating the database. When we do make a major repair, how do we allocate whatever was repaired? Are there points sort of allocated if we redo HVAC, for instance? Does that reduce the overall score by a certain amount? Is that how we keep it updated?
Yeah, part-time counselor. So that's exactly right. So within the apps database, each asset within the facility has a line. And when you replace that asset, it impacts the score for that facility overall. So for instance, with City Hall, we replaced the entirety of the HVAC system through the distribution system, through the air handler. There are a few components that remain because our boilers were still fairly new, and so we didn't replace those. But as those replacements are entered in and we go so far as to enter the serial numbers and like really unique identifying information for each of those assets, and then we know what the projected life is, and then it'll calculate out a new FCI score based on that. And then through the FCI and all of the narrative reports kind of walked through how this worked, but they also categorized certain building systems higher than others. So for instance, interior and exterior finishes were rated a little bit lower than like water distribution systems or sewer systems, right? And so it's already behind the scenes factoring all that stuff through the software database. All we have to do is make sure that we're keeping it up to date.
Follow-up. Does that also is that calculated over time? So our City Hall score should be as high as it's going to be for the foreseeable future now. And then if we see that score next year and the year after that, is that automatically happening within the software that it's reducing by a certain number of points as time goes on as those systems get older?
Yeah, so it projects it out based on the number of years of life expectancy of whatever system it is. So it does automatically adjust year after year. Answering your question,
Yeah,
right? In addition to that, it estimates the replacement cost and applies an inflation rate each year. And I don't remember exactly what that inflation rate is. I'd have to do some digging. I believe it's 3 to 5%. Don't hold me to that, but the software is pretty good at, forecasting out. And in fact, we've had to do some elevator work and other work where we're using those figures as the basis of our cost estimate, and they're actually impressively good.
One more follow-up.
Okay.
I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Is there any process in place, and that all makes great sense. Is there any process in place to reconvene with staff on a regular basis to see if anything around the concern feature or the you know, what type of essential nature that's playing those sort of more subjective criteria. Is there a plan in place to keep those up to date as well?
Counselor, absolutely. So, you know, the staff meets every single morning. We do a tailgate meeting with the staff to kind of talk about pinch points and priorities and how they may have shifted since the day before. But as part of the standard operating procedures that we're developing, Matt, Tom, and I said, okay, at least quarterly, we're going through and we're updating both apps to make sure that it's accurate in terms of replacements or repairs that have been made, but also talking about that historical concern number and where it should be. So, I mean, at the very least, you're gonna see it once a year during capital planning, but our goal is to do it quarterly so that it's not such a heavy lift.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mayor, councilors, I just, a couple of things I've observed. First of all, I wanted to kudos to Zalima and Matt for doing an amazing job here and putting all this data together. And it was a lot of fun to sit there and try and figure out how we weight this data to help drive us. I think a couple of things are important to mention. Number one is, as we keep this FCI score up live, you know, this was, hey, do you agree with the concept? And if you, now that you agree with the concept, then we put that live FCI score in that we'll be looking at every quarter. And then we look at it weighted. And I can tell you, in working on the sort command on this summer, we did something wrong because when we sort by other amounts, it drops, it doesn't change all the numbers. So there's a little formula in the spreadsheet I need to work on because right now it's showing Fire Station 1 as only being a 1 on the essential city function and it should be a 3. So just, but I noticed when we sort by FCI 2022 score, then all those numbers are in the correct place. And I watched the numbers and the correct totals are coming out. It's just not sorting all the data. So I apologize for that. That's my fault. But again, staff did an amazing job. Matt did a great job and has made a real commitment to updating this FCI score and keeping it live. And to me, this becomes a very, very useful tool quarterly and absolutely annually when we look at, hey, what do we need to have budgeted this year? And then envelope in there all the information, human resource information that we have from the folks that are boots on the ground that are maintaining this equipment.
I think that I like this form, and if you guys are looking at this quarterly and updating it, would it be a possibility to just put that into our info packet so that we can kind of keep an eye on things as well? Would you guys?
Council, absolutely, absolutely. We can put a reminder in there quarterly when we do this to update that report and show you the information. And I love what Zalima did with the color codes. It really jumps out at you right away when things that are hitting that critical number.
Yes.
Cool. Really good.
Thank you. All right, moving on to priority-based budgeting. City manager?
I don't know that I'm gonna offer any introduction to this that would be better than the presentation you're gonna hear by Jill Johnson, our Financial Services Director. So I will just kick it right over to her.
Ms. Johnson?
Mayor, councilors, I am actually really excited to present this to the council tonight. This is not something that you guys have ever heard of before. It's something brand new. So, button do I push? Okay, thank you. So, this is going to be about priority-based budgeting. And you notice on the screen, it says reimagining budgeting because it's going to be something totally different than what we are used to right now. So before we can reimagine budgeting, we have to know what we're doing today. And it doesn't, where am I supposed to? There we are. So currently what we do is we use an incremental budgeting method to develop our budget. So as you guys are all aware, every May we come forward with a list of line items that have numbers in it. So how do they get there? So our incremental budget starts with what number do we have in there today? So if I have materials and supplies for finance, it's going to have a number in there. And I'm assuming that each year my service level stays the same, my revenue stayed the same, and so I can come back and say, okay, this is what I did last year. So I can either pull that up or I can push it down, depending on what I expect to happen in the next year. The really great thing about this is it's super easy. It's something that just rolls things forward year over year. As long as the environment is very stable, no problems. What happens though, when we have something that is more of a volatile type of environment, where we now have maybe not enough revenue to cover all of our expenses? So this type of budgeting makes it a little bit harder to determine if I need to make a 20% cut to our budget because our revenues are not coming in. It doesn't really take into account what is the priority of the services that we are providing. So that's where we're going to talk about something that's a little bit different. So again, it's called priority-based budgeting, and I'm going to start out with the history of it. So this is not something I was sitting at my desk one day and said, let's do this. This is something that's actually been out there for a long time. Back in the early 1900s, the initial concepts of priority-based budgeting were thought about. In the 50s and 60s, the federal government actually adopted this, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And then in the 1990s, there was really much more focus on performance and making sure that the budget was doing what it needed to do. So we've come a little bit further, it's evolved, and we're going to talk about what that looks like tonight. So I also was thinking about when I was putting this presentation together, is this something for big government? Is it something for like a Denver-sized city? Or can anybody do it? So as you can see on the screen, we have 5 different governments in there. They have very small governments, a little bit bigger, and we also have 2 other governments that we actually did a reference call on to see how they did their priority-based budgeting, and they are about the same size as we are. So it is not a big government type of thing. So why do we want it? So what are we trying to achieve? So when you think about what does government do, there's some questions, there's 5 questions up there that when we think of our incremental budget, I don't know that we can answer those questions. So the priority-based budget really helps us to answer those questions. Number 1, what are we in the business to do? And what exactly are we doing? And how much does it cost? Is the things that we are providing important? Some are more important than others. How can we allocate our resources to be funding things that are the highest importance? And then having a feedback loop that says, okay, if we did these programs and we developed these goals, when do we know that we are successful? What are the results? These are the key elements of a priority-based budget. The first thing is it's all about the council. The council has to set a strategic plan. It has to be very clear. It has to be very measurable. So you guys set the priorities for everything that we will do. Once we get that strategic plan developed, or even at the same time, city staff can then go through and say, okay, here's a list of all of our programs. So you're hearing programs a lot because in a priority-based budget system, we're not looking at line items anymore. We're not looking at the finance department needs this much money. We're looking at a program. So if we think of the assist program for transit, how much money does that cost? That is a program and it has a specific cost. So we develop a list of programs and we assign cost to each program. Then we have our stakeholders. Our stakeholders are people that use these programs. They are the council, they are city staff, and they are other entities that actually have a stake in how we score these programs. So we heard from Zulema about scoring. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but each program would get a score, and your score from 0 to 100, your hundreds align with the council strategic plan. The zeros, not so much. So this provides the council with data-driven decision-making tools. So, and it also requires that feedback loop to determine, is the program actually successful? So I talked about cost. When we define what is the cost of a program, so when you think of a program, it's not specific to maybe finance. It is something that is across all funds, across all, every part of the organization can be part of a program. So we go back to the transit example. So we have the assist program. We know it takes a bus and a driver, go pick up somebody and take them to their appointment. But it's so much more than that. We also need somebody to answer the phone and somebody to schedule that. We also need HR to provide recruiting services for those people. We also need gas in the bus. We also need all of these other costs that are located in all different parts of our organization. And we combine those all into a program. So who are our stakeholders? Again, government officials. That's you guys. You're the policymakers. So you are at the top of all of this. You are creating our strategic plan. You are giving us a plan to move forward and do great things for our organization. You have employees. Employees are important. They are executing the programs. They are helping us to track whether we are being successful or not. You have other public agencies and departments. This could be EPA. They're going to be interested in how do we value that program. And then you're also going to have the people who are most important, which is our citizens. They are the beneficiaries of the programs that we provide. And they should have an input into, is this important to me? So this chart is like the meat and potatoes of this whole presentation. So because it's very small, I actually gave you guys a handout. And so as you look at how priority-based budgeting works, you have your strategic plan, you have all of your programs, have them all costed, and then you have them scored. And what it does is it gives you these 4 quartiles. So if you look on the bottom, your cost goes from low cost to high cost. And then your impact goes from low impact to high impact. So if you look at your first quartile, which is going to be on the top left, that is a high impact to our community and a low cost. In addition to that, within each quartile, you also have, is it mandated? And the other thing is there a reliance on this? Are we the only ones that can provide that? So as you look at each one of these, if you have something that is high impact and low cost, you would probably want to continue to provide that. That makes sense. So the one category that really stands out that would be a place where we should look at is our money actually going to the right place, is if we look at in the 4th quartile, we have a low impact, high cost. So it's not impacting a lot of citizens. It's costing us a lot of money. So then we look at those other 2 criteria. Is it mandated? So in the 3rd box, the second one down, those are not mandated. So if I have a low cost or a high cost program that has low impact, that has no mandate, and the citizens are not reliant on it, wouldn't we look at taking the funds that are being used for those programs and reallocating it into something that has a higher impact? So I'm not saying that we should get rid of all the programs. That's not it. It's looking at what are our other options to provide these services that can reduce our cost and allow us to reallocate those dollars. So this is not new dollars. These are dollars we already have. We're just going to spend them more wisely. So within this chart, you will be surprised to know that this is actually data from the city of Casper. So we have a technology company that we've been working with, and they went out to our website and they scraped the data off of our 2024 budget, and they ran it through their system, and ta-da, here we go. We have not had any input into any of this. So when we look at it and say, okay, there's 22 programs that could potentially be reallocated for $6.5 million, that is just the initial thing. We have not looked at any of these programs. We haven't looked at whether that makes any sense or not. It's just to give you a visual on what this can do. So again, I've had no input. I've had zero time that I have put into this. It's run through their process, and this is the chart that they give us. I think that this is really important, and it is a way for the council to know whether this program is aligned with your goals or maybe not so much. So I think that we do a super good job of when we come to you guys in May, we have looked holistically at the budget. So we come and we say, this is all the money we need for a year. And that's great. It really looks at priorities, it looks at capital, it looks at lots of different criteria to get us our budget. Where we really struggle a little bit is where we have these off-cycle opportunities. So people come to the council all the time and say, hey, I've got this great thing I want to do. One thing I can remember here recently is we talked about the grant opportunity for the pathway along Wyoming Boulevard. And what I heard from several counselors is this truly our priority? So in doing the incremental budget, it's hard to see that. But this would be a definite way that we could look at that. So each program or any kind of expansion to a program that would come to council requesting more money would go through that same process. It would go through the scoring, it would go through the costing, it would go through whatever we needed to do to get you a score. And then when that program is brought to you, you can say, okay, what is the score for this? And if it's a 20, maybe that's something to rethink. If it's an 80 and it really aligns with what you guys are trying to do, then maybe that is something that is truly a priority. So this is not just a budget system for once a year. This is a budget system for all the time. So what are some of the potential challenges to this? First of all, I think the benefits of this type of budgeting are super important. I think that it is really data-driven. It gives you some really great information to make great decisions. So there is a cost to this implementation. The software that is used to create these charts and some templates and things like that for us does cost money. In addition to that, there would be a staff impact. So it wouldn't be adding new staff, but staff will need to put some time into helping getting this going and keeping it going. Also, council has a role in this as well. So council has to be willing to commit to following the data. So if we bring you something and it's really something you want to do, but the alignment to your goals is very low, that would be something that council would need to consider. Maybe we don't want to do that. So if we decide that the commitment is not there, then the benefits to the city really won't be realized. So what are the required tools? I would not be standing here in front of you if there was not a tool that we could use to do this. Again, this has not been something that is new. It's been out there for a long time. But because there has not been a technology solution, the amount of staff time, it would be, I think, 5 more people in my department. And I would not be willing to suggest that. So there's a company, it's called Resource X. This company, this is what they do. They do priority-based budgeting. They are a technology tool. That's all they do. They utilize AI so that instead of staff doing all of this work, they utilize AI to give us a baseline, and then staff can review and make sure that the program listings and costs are accurate. They provide scoring templates. They do the quartile report. They do an ROI report, which gives you insights on what other governments do. So if we have a challenge, well, this is what other governments would do. If it was something that we wanted to do, they would give you a step-by-step on this is how Casper could do it. So it's really kind of a neat ROI report, which gives you all of that information. Resource X was recently purchased by Tyler Technologies, which if you're familiar with that name, it's because we use Munis, which is a Tyler product. They are currently integrating Resource X with Tyler. So as we were to put things into Resource X, it would roll into Tyler through their budgeting process. I have not found any other technology company that provides this type of tool for priority-based budgeting. I've had some that say they can, but I haven't seen anything that really compares with what this technology provides. So we did do a couple of references on Resource X, not just Resource X, but priority-based budgeting in general. So the two that we talked to Battle Creek, Michigan, and we talked to their city administrator. They actually have a commission versus a council. But they were looking at a budget shortfall, so they needed to make some change. Their commission really likes that their programs are aligned with their strategic plan. So their goals are aligned with what they do. They also like that within the quartiles, in quartile 1 and quartile 2, which are both high impact to their citizens, 80% of their budget is there. So the city administrator also said she had to keep reminding them that in quartile 4, that should not be 0. There are some things that need to be there. So don't try and get that all the way to 0. So, and again, they like seeing the priorities match to the plan. We also spoke with the CFO at Flagstaff, Arizona. So he talked a little bit more about the implementation. So when they implemented Resource X, it didn't have some of the AI pieces that it has today. So they really required a lot of staff time to get them up and running. Their personnel costs in particular were a challenge because they needed to be allocated to all the programs. We will probably see that same challenge. Their council was very enthusiastic. Again, they like seeing the whole budget broken down by program. So when you think about what you will see in May, our budget will be not a bunch of lines. It'll be programs with cost related to them. So if we think about our 2025 budget, the general fund was $55 million. We would see that same $55 million just broken out in all of the programs that the general fund provides. The other council benefits that they talked about was that instead of getting lost in all the details of all the line items, they get a nice high level view of this is what we are providing to our citizens and this is what it cost. They also talked about the scoring being contentious. So what if I really wanted a particular program, but the score came in really low? I'd be like, I think you guys are wrong. You need to fix that. And we talked to them a lot about how did they fix that. And they talked about utilizing citizen advisory boards to help to score the programs, which kind of takes that out of, in some ways, out of staff's hands and allows the citizens to talk about what's important to them. So what is next? Okay, so this topic was actually presented to the Finance Committee back in July, and their recommendation was to bring it to council, which is what we are doing tonight. So based on your direction, we can either begin implementing priority-based budgeting, or we can retain incremental budgeting and move forward. What my recommendation would be is that council consider a pilot program for the next 2 years that we would move to the priority-based budgeting methodology for the fiscal year 26 and 27 budgets. This is the cost of this. So the Resource X software has an implementation cost of $33,000 and an ongoing annual cost of $96,000. I want you to remember though what it gives you. So if you look at your quartiles and you have programs that could potentially be reallocated, some of that money could go to fund this software to get us where we want to go. So and with that, do you have any questions that I can answer?
Any questions? Councilor Gamber.
Thank you for coming there. And thanks, Jill, presentation. I was really looking forward to this discussion. I had mentioned that I saw you presented in the Finance Committee a couple months ago, and so yeah, I've been looking forward to this discussion. My question is, in the research I was doing when this first popped on my radar, I know there's several different budgeting styles or methods. There's incremental, like we currently do. There's priority-based, which you just informed us on, and then I believe there's also performance-based and zero-based. Could you tell me, did you and your team do an analysis of the other budgeting methods as well? Was there a reason that you really focused in on priority-based? Just curious, other considerations were made as well.
Mayor, Councilor. So I did realize that you had asked about the zero-based budgeting. So zero-based budgeting, again, has been out there for a long time. In all of my years of working in government finance, I have never used a zero-based budget. What that means is that basically you don't start at last year's number, you start at 0, and you have to justify everything that you put into that line. It is typically very time consuming and, again, if you have a same level of service you're expecting to provide, most governments just don't do it. So the performance-based budgeting kind of has a similar track. It's just looking at the back end. It's looking at it from a performance standpoint. I like the priority-based budgeting because I like how it aligns to what you have given us for your strategic plan. The performance-based budgeting basically goes through it and makes sure that the programs that are provided are performing as intended.
I was curious, it sounds like you've kind of alluded to as much, but I was curious if our current strategic plan, if there's enough substance there to inform this tool, or do we need to get more granular in our strategic planning to, give this tool and give your team more metrics or more goals to kind of base the priorities off of?
Mayor, Councilor, actually, this is actually good timing to do this type of budgeting. We have a strategic planning session, which the city manager typically does in April, February, March, April, somewhere in there. So at that time, we would request that the city manager allow us to bring someone from Resource X to the retreat and really work with you guys on determining what are your goals and what is your plan. And then they could help you kind of get the level of granularity that we would need to be able to do this.
Thank you. And then lastly, just again, I'm a big fan of this. I would love to learn more about this. I'd love to integrate it into our next strategic plan if I'm a part of that. Because that's always been my frustration with the budget is it's $200 million. It's a lot. It's like trying to comprehend the scope of the universe, man. It's kind of beyond my understanding. And so I love the idea of using AI and leveraging AI to help us prioritize all of these things that we're trying to achieve, because then it removes the emotional, we all have our own individual biases, we all have our individual preferences and stuff, and it kind of removes that emotional bias out of it. And just, I'm a very data-driven guy, and so if we can, create the data and leverage AI to help us prioritize all that based on what we decided is, our strategic plan and what our top priorities are. Like, I'm really digging all this. So, yeah, thank you for the presentation. Eagerly awaiting to learn more.
Councilor Pollack.
Thank you. So I think I'm interested in the 2-year pilot. I think that makes sense. What I like the most about it is seeing the all-in cost for any given service that we're offering versus seeing that distributed across 10 departments and really being unable to piece out, what percentage of this person's salary is going to this thing. So to me, that's a much more intuitive way to look at it. We offer this thing and it costs this much. I think it puts a lot more pressure on our goals and our goal setting process than we've had in the past. And I think I might suggest that our current process for setting goals is like not up to the task of creating as comprehensive of a goal set as I think like this would require. And so I think I would like to see that process become more robust in order for me to feel like we really hit on the goals that can inform a budget in this way. So I love the idea that there's a citizen advisory panels or, as part of this budgeting process. I might suggest that ought to be a feature of a more robust goal setting process as well. I think, I think we've improved our goal setting process over my tenure on council, the 2 times that we've done it, but I'm not sure that I feel like, oh yeah, we've got it. Our process is solid and it's really yielding us goals that I would feel comfortable saying, well, we're going to base an entire budget around these goal sets. So yes, and I think we need to probably allocate some more attention to our building out a more robust goal setting process to marry with this process.
Councilor Sullivan.
Yes, thank you. So I think my question kind of is connected to Amber's. I think I'm struggling a little bit to understand the level of effort required to shift. To me, it feels fairly immense for a 2-year pilot project. So maybe my first question is that, like, we talk about council goals, and you mentioned a strategic plan, but I don't have a strategic plan.
Separate.
And I am currently in like a year-long process of developing a strategic, like, those are pretty intense. So I guess my question is, like, how often, so did you say a strategic plan would be developed annually?
Mayor, Counselor, I did not say that.
Okay,
Actually, the references that we talked to, they suggested taking your strategic plan and working your goals and not really revisiting that for a few years.
okay,
So, it would not be an annual process.
okay,
And it is not current. It is a 2-year process.
okay. That makes more sense. And then I guess, can you help me understand, sorry, is it okay to do a follow-up? Can you help me understand what it is about the process right now that isn't working?
Mayor, Counselor, first of all, there's nothing wrong with the way we budget currently. It's looking at the budget using a methodology that works for many governments throughout the US. It is an accepted practice to do your budget that way, so there's nothing wrong with it. The difference that we would see is within a line item budget, kind of to one of the counselors' other comment, is it's difficult to see what is that money actually doing. So if you look at it by program, you're looking at what are we providing to the community and what is the cost of that? And again, it's not just a cost within a department, it's a cost throughout the city. Many different departments all work together to provide services for many different programs. So we would see it on a program level. And that's really the big difference that you see is the connection of those programs that are costed out so that you know the entire cost and then connecting those to the strategic plan, where we don't really have that with an incremental budget.
Can I just do one more follow-up? It makes a lot of sense to me. Just in terms of having that more compartmentalized perspective on each of the ways that we operate. And it's kind of connected to what Kyle was saying but I'm actually, I'd like to know a little bit more about how it is also a subjective process. And have you heard from other municipalities that use this process who've actually found themselves in positions where they're having to defend regular operations of the city government, or, these things that we rely a lot on staff, because you're the experts in what you're doing. And I just wonder, like, has it ever been the case then where council and staff is then having to, like, really make the case for why this thing matters? Or, like, does it introduce a degree of subjectivity that could actually be harmful to the budget making process is my question.
Mayor, Counselor, that's a great question. So by utilizing the different stakeholder groups, you tend to get rid of that subjectivity because you've got different groups with different perspectives that are scoring these programs. So we don't just take one group and say, staff believes that this is wonderful and yes, it's going to do what we want it to do. It would be staff looking at it. It would be citizen groups looking at it. It would be other regulatory agencies looking at it. It would be the council looking at it. So within all of that feedback, we would develop these scores. So that tends to take some subjectivity out of it because you have so many inputs. We did not get any kind of feedback that there was a conflict with normal operations of the city. If you think about what the city does, you know, when you think about normal operations, okay, so finance is a support group. We don't really have probably any programs of our own, but we would support every other one. So we would take our budget, we would allocate that to all the different programs. HR, same way. We would probably do that by personnel. So if this program had 6 people, allocate 6% of the budget to them. So we really didn't talk about it really being an issue where there was a conflict that kept the budget from being produced.
Oh, I've got lots more.
Counselor Bond?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So Jill, I'm very interested in this. I agree with you. I think this could be the foundation for priority-based budgeting. I'm curious though about the, this graph was created or based on our data and our budget currently. And so I'm just as concisely as you can, I'm curious about whether this was done using AI or how it was done to determine the level of impact. I mean, and the cost, because that all seems kind of relative. In some senses, you know, some programs obviously would clearly have a higher impact than others, but the cost again seems kind of relative based on, you know, need and volume and et cetera. So can you kind of describe that briefly? I'm sorry. That's a big ask maybe, but.
Mayor, Counselor, actually, I cannot describe that very much because the company that did this has proprietary software. So they took basically a scrape of all of our data and they ran it through their algorithms and the AI. Again, AI is something I think is a wonderful tool, but it's a beginning. It's not an end.
Right.
And we would never publish something that would just be created by AI. That would make me very nervous.
Absolutely.
So this was just a way for them to show what potentially this would look like. So what I'm talking about, you know, in that one box, we would have 22 programs for $6.5 million. I don't know that that's the real number. We would need to evaluate each of those programs, determine what costs actually go to them, and then run it back through and have this presented again.
Thank you. And then just a couple observations if I could too. Again, I think this would be foundational to that type of thing, to have this information in the budgeting process. I would be supportive of a 2-year pilot for the priority-based. I think there is some value in knowing that it's a pilot to you know, kind of get your hands dirty with it, so to speak, you know, for both your office and for council to get some experience around it first. That would be a valuable learning thing. And at the end of the 2 years, we can evaluate and, you know, see what, and then I guess the other observation, I guess it's kind of along the lines of some of the other counselors in terms of, I agree with Councilor Pollack about the need to continue to make our strategic planning process very robust in terms of, I think a couple of ways that come to my mind would be stakeholder involvement, both in terms of I think citizens as well as staff and the council. To me, that is kind of the trifecta of a very robust way of looking at our strategic needs. And then the second would be, and I've mentioned this before around and I think it fits very well with your comments about the reliability on data to inform all of this. And so I think that would be pretty critical step in our strategic planning process is to, what are the metrics that tell us we're meeting our strategic goals? And it's not an easy thing to do, but it can be done, I believe. You know, that's been part of my experience of been, you know, once you have those measures, it really creates very clear clarity about what it is we're trying to accomplish. And I think with that kind of broadening our base of input and contribution to the strategic plan, I think that would increase the robustness of it. So that's my, but Jill, thank you so much for this and all the work on the investigation you've had to do on this priority-based budgeting. So thank you.
City Manager Napier?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Good evening, everybody. Just a couple of questions, Jill. My understanding was that this would not replace, but rather be a companion piece to the line item budget that we are accustomed to using and seeing. Is that true?
He said that this was not to replace what we're currently doing, and this is a line item budget, correct, Carter?
Right. Yes.
Mayor, city manager. So we will actually still have to produce a line item budget because otherwise we can't connect our dollars to our general ledger. So there has to be a line item budget. However, the dollars that you will see within the line item budget may be allocated to many different programs. So when we come back to you with a budget, you're going to see it broken out by program and cost. So when we think of a line item, let's say there's a finance personnel line item, that line item could be allocated amongst many different programs. So again, we still have to produce a line item budget to be able to connect our dollars to our general ledger, but the dollars within that will be represented differently by program versus by line item.
I appreciate that clarification. I have one more follow-up, if I may, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead.
What role does this level of budgeting have in streamlining services so that indeed the programs are meritorious and reflective of services that are supported by both the strategic plan as well as by the priority-based budgeting that the council sets forward?
Mayor, city manager, I'm having a really hard time hearing you. Would you do that one more time for me?
Akin to what Councilor Sutherland was asking, I think. My question is, can you not hear?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
very
can't
well.
hear. It's really quiet.
Okay.
There
Let
you
me try
go.
one more time. If it doesn't work, I'll just hang it up. Sorry. So my question is, what role does this mode of budgeting have in streamlining services that we offer in order to fit both within the strategic plan as well as the programming that the budget calls for?
Did you hear that?
Mayor, city manager, let's see if I can get this as an answer to your question. So I believe what you're asking is, what role does this type of budgeting have in making sure that our dollars are aligning with the plan, strategic plan? Does that sound like what you're asking?
In the form of services that we offer that may need to be curtailed.
So, Mayor, city manager. So again, as we look at the quartile map and we focus on programs which may be scored very low, that they are not aligning with the council goals or the council strategic plan, this is where we would take these programs apart and we could look at how can we provide these services, maybe at a lower cost, maybe not at all. Maybe we could take those dollars and reallocate them to a different program or something of a higher priority. So priority-based budgeting really looks at every service that we do. It looks at the alignment with the strategic goals, and it makes sure that if you are in this box, this is something that needs to be looked at, taken apart, see how we can change it, do it better, do it cheaper, do it, in different ways to be able to, take those dollars and possibly reallocate them. Does that answer your question, Mr. City Manager?
I think it does, and I think what you're saying is that while we do need to have some services and programs in that lower quartile of your graph, there may be times where those services are rendered not important and need to be done away with.
Mayor, City Manager, that is exactly what I'm saying. Thank you for that synopsis.
Thank you.
Counselor Pacheco. Rich?
Okay, I am, so maybe just thoughts. I don't know if there's a question. But I think to me, a budget driven by a strategic plan makes sense. I'm like all in on it making sense to build out a strategic plan. I'm a little less just transparency wise, and I won't be here to make the decision, but I'm a little less convinced that now is the time to completely shift the way that the budgeting isn't, or the way that we operate and build the budget, if what we're doing right now is working and we aren't facing, you know, a budget crisis, volatility in the system. I mean, I've been hungry for, you know, a strategic plan that's more comprehensive than just goals. I think that offers that kind of overarching perspective. And so I guess that's just, I just have like kind of a gut hesitancy that I'm not sure I can even intellectually articulate. But another question that I have is if we weren't, like, it is very interesting to see this. And I guess I'm curious if there's some sort of hybrid approach where when the strategic plan is developed every 4 years, is there an opportunity to, at that moment, kind of glimpse into where things are falling, in terms of what's meeting priorities or what's not, and maybe that then negates the purpose of, like, I don't know if you can go back and forth in between incremental budgeting and this, but there's just, I don't know, I have some reservation about a massive shift if we're not quite seeing the conditions that would necessitate that.
Mayor, Councilor, I appreciate your comments. Unfortunately, if you have something that's a downturn, it's too late then. So as we prepare for different changes in the economy and that type of thing, this type of budgeting gives us that lens to be able to make sure that the programs which council considers a priority continue to be funded even in times of economic stress.
It's a camera.
Mayor Pro Tem. I guess one note I would like to make is, I think city staff does an amazing job putting together a budget, but one of the things that concerns me, and one of the reasons I'm eager to change it up a little bit, is we just went over our facility condition assessment, and we have $144 million in repairs to our 130 plus public buildings. I've been fighting my entire tenure to get more streets funding, which I'm still not content we're at the level we need to be at. Former public service director said we were $100 million in the hole in streets, backlog streets projects. We have stormwater, wastewater. We have so many critical infrastructure funding needs that I think we need help in regards to reprioritizing and reallocating some of our current expenditures to catch up on that. Otherwise, the status quo seems to have been that it feels like we have not been keeping up with maintenance in a way that I would like to see and that I consider responsible. And so that's what appeals to me about this, is I think it could help us begin to catch up in that. And again, there'd be some painful sacrifices to make in that process, but hopefully this would give us a real objective analysis of, based on, the impact to our citizens, minimizing the impact to as many citizens as possible, identifying those high cost, low impact programs and being as surgical about it as we can. That's what appeals to me about the process. One question I did have though, as I'm sitting here thinking about, is in regards to, pathways. You mentioned the Wyoming Boulevard Pathway Project. Oftentimes we're able to achieve those only because we get TAP grants from the state or from federal government. And so I'm curious, if we do priority-based budgeting, how do they weight those factors? How does it weight, if we spend $100,000 in this pathway here, we're going to receive a 9-to-1 match, and we're able to construct $1 million pathway with $100,000 in city expenditures. How does it take into account those sorts of considerations?
Mayor, Councilor, excuse me. One of the criteria that it looks at as it's trying to put it into one of these quartiles is cost recovery. So if we have a $8 million project and we have most of that funded with a grant, that's going to be cost recovery. So in this TAP grant, we have most of it covered. We still have $800,000 that is not covered. But again, the system will take that into account when it goes to put it somewhere. The other things that we'll look at is, how does that impact our citizens? Will a lot of people use it? Is there a reliance on it? Is there a different way to do the same thing? Can they use a different path to get from point A to point B? So there is a lot of criteria that goes into where it places it within the quartiles and what that score looks like. So it's not just one piece, it's a holistic view on all of the different projects and the different criterias that put it within the graph.
Thank you. So let's just stay on the path of the Wyoming Boulevard project since we've used it as kind of a precedent. So I guess I'm still trying to understand, how does this proprietary software measure the impact to citizens, identify potential redundancies? Do we have to feed it? Do we have to feed it like GIS data with our trails identified, or what data does it use to inform those analyses?
So, Mayor, Councilor, it's going to use the financial, and it's going to use the structure of our general ledger. So it's going to determine that community development has a program that is called zoning or zoning changes or something like that. And then it will go through and try to pick out all of the different pieces that go with that. Again, AI is not going to solve all of this. It's going to give us a baseline, and then staff will need to come back to it and say, this isn't quite like that. We actually have this cost recovery. We also have these other things that we do in that group. So it is not the be all end all to use AI, but it does give us a place to start. It reduces the staffing needs that if we didn't have that technology solution, that would require a lot of hours of staff time to be able to figure it out. It's not saying that it's not going to require any staff time, but it would be reduced.
I have a few questions myself. So I guess for starters, what is the cost of the way that you're doing everything now versus this? Because it looks like this new program is going to cost approximately $129,000 a year. So what's our current cost?
Mayor, actually, we do not have a cost currently. The cost that we have for our budget module within Munis is part of what we pay with Tyler Technologies for all of our accounting systems. So it has been part of that cost from the beginning. This would be an additional cost. And just to be clear, that $33,000 is only for implementation. After that, that will drop off and it would just be the annual licensing fee for the software.
Okay, so that leads to the next question. Where would this money come from?
Mayor, so hopefully, as we start looking at where all of these priorities are and the possibility of reallocating money that we already have, that would be where I would propose that it be absorbed.
Okay, and then, my last one. So if we're gonna be utilizing AI to kind of help identify certain aspects of the budget, would AI also have the ability to identify potential grant opportunities?
Mayor, I do not know the answer to that question. This particular software probably would not. Could AI help us find other grant opportunities? I do not know the answer to that question.
Does anybody else have any other
I'm
questions?
just gonna make a comment on
Okay.
the question. I'm gonna support this and I think we can move forward with it for the 2-year pilot. And I think that it'd be a good idea to help us more in depth with our strategic plans and how that aligns with what we're trying to do with our budget. So I'll support that for the 2-year pilot. That's where I'm gonna sit on. So.
Okay, so this looks like it's a direction requested. Everybody voting aye? Please record. Guess you've got your direction.
Mayor, thank you. Thank you, council.
Thank you. All right, Salima. Acting City Manager, you were up Veteran Park plans.
So
You probably want to speak up. We have quite a few people.
So back in April of 2024, we came to the city council with some recommendations to make some, at least at the time, minor enhancements to Veterans Park, primarily in the removal of a deteriorating a circular concrete seating structure that was in the park. It was in very poor condition. It was attracting some less than desirable activities in the park, and we felt strongly that it needed to come down for the safety and security of the park, as well as, because of the dilapidated condition. At that time, council supported the removal of that structure, but there was also some conversation about whether or not our current Veterans Park is in an appropriate location to serve that community, and to be the pivotal, dedicated monument park for the veterans in our community. And so at that time, we already had started the Parks and Rec master plan, and I understood that council gave direction to have the master plan evaluate the existing Veterans Park and its condition, just like it did with the rest of the parks in the park system, but also to take an extra look at whether it may be appropriate to move Veterans Park to another location in the community. And so they did that. Of course, you know that we presented on September 10th, the draft master plan, which is still open for public comment for 2 days. So if you haven't reviewed the plan and submitted your comments, I implore you to do that. But generally speaking, the master plan did make a recommendation that we should consider moving our existing Veterans Park to City Park because it offered some better accessibility and some opportunity for growth. So on September 20th, our City Parks Division, led by myself and Randy Norvell, pulled together a meeting of several of the veterans groups in the community. It's very difficult to identify them all and make sure that everyone have representation. But I can say that we had, more than 20 people in attendance, and based on the sign-in sheet that they signed, if they shared who they were representing, we had at least 8 to 9 organizations represented, likely more. And so in that presentation, we shared what the Parks and Rec Master Plan recommendation was, and we just tried to talk through what the desire was of the group. Certainly, there seems to be some support among some of the attendees to relocate the park, to give it better access, to provide more parking, to provide a place where people could gather and celebrate that wasn't the Veterans Cemetery, which is currently used now. But absolutely, there was some concern shared about the fact that the location that it's at right now is very, very visible along 2nd Street, that it is Casper's first and dedicated Veterans Park, and so that there's some historical significance there that they wanted and needed to honor. And so based on the Parks and Rec Master Plan and the feedback that we received from that one meeting, my recommendation to you would be that we, in the short term, so probably a 1 to 2 year timeline, we make enhancements that are needed at Veterans Park to make it a better place for our veterans to gather and reflect and be proud of. What I'm recommending is improvements that would likely be needed regardless of if we relocated the park. We need to improve the small amount of parking that does exist, some ADA accessibility. Certainly, we could look at improving the quality and the condition of the turf, make sure the trees are uplifted, make sure things are cleaned up, improve the lighting. Those are things that if we were to retain it, even as a trailhead or other use, those things would need to happen. And so it wouldn't be sunken cost, it would be an investment in that park. In addition to that, we propose that we develop an advisory committee or task force that will continue to meet to talk about the future of Veterans Park. Clearly that one meeting was not enough to gain consensus among the community about what we need to do. And so we just need more time to talk to members of those groups and figure out what the future of that park needs to be, including the location. And so that would be our short-term recommended strategy. In the long term, we would like to propose that we hire a consultant that specializes in park planning to help us either design improvements primarily in growth opportunity for the existing park or the park relocated somewhere else to be determined in the future through these advisory committee meetings. And so through that planning process, then we would identify key components that are really important to users of the park and make sure that they are incorporated in the design. Many of those were included in the memo for your consideration, but ultimately we're just asking for a little bit more time to work with members of groups, many of who are here tonight, to make sure that we're moving forward in a path that represents what the community wants. So with that, I'm open to any comments or questions that you have or direction that you may have for staff.
Councilor Pacheco.
Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate your time and efforts. Appreciate you guys for being here and helping us out, try to make some decisions. It is an important decision. It's not one that should be easily made. So I appreciate the fact that we're going to take time to evaluate, to see the pros and the cons around that. I certainly can see the pros and cons of both, but I also see the rich history of that. But I do certainly support the idea of taking it slow, doing that, being a little bit more pragmatic and thoughtful around the approach. Having advisory is always beneficial. So everybody's voices are heard within, especially within groups that benefit from that park. So I'm in support of that. Let me ask you this, Salima. As far as hiring a consultant for this, is that something we would do right away, or is that something we would do down the road where once we kind of get more of an idea of where we're going? So it wouldn't be like today, we're gonna be like, hey, let's hire the consultant.
Pro Tem Counselor, so we would certainly go through the engagement process first and then hire a consultant to help us execute the desires and the plans recommended through the advisory committee.
Thank you.
Councilor Gamble.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks, Zulima, for the information. And yeah, thanks to everyone that showed up, even though a work session where you don't get the opportunity for public comment, but your presence. Hopefully we were able to solicit quite a bit of feedback from y'all in the initial conversation. But I would concur with Ray. I don't see any rush to do this. The temporary short-term improvements sounds like regardless of what direction the current Veterans Park space takes in the future, we'll be able to leverage those investments still, and they won't be in vain. So that's why I would support the short-term investment. I guess I would ask, since I may not be a part of, probably won't be a part of, since I wasn't at the first session, but in future planning discussions, advisory discussions, as far as where the park would be located, I apologize. One question. Why was City Park, I guess, identified? Just because it has the space and is centrally located, maybe? Okay. I'll take the nods of agreement as, pretty straightforward. I guess I would ask whatever future advisory group considers a potential relocation of Veterans Park. To me, I see Dean in the crowd, and we worked with him and his stakeholders to, install the memorial at Patterson-Zonta Park. That area, Patterson-Zonta with the memorial, Fort Casper, and there's a lot of history there in regards to, military and service and stuff. And so I guess, I don't know what the user groups or what the, folks that are very interested in this discussion would think of that. But to me, there seems like there's a lot of synergy in that area. And so just throwing that out there as 2 cents. I hope we consider other parks, not just City Park, because I think there's some synergy that we can leverage in maybe some of the other areas of town. Thanks.
Any other questions? Will you be working with the veterans for the short-term improvements so that?
Mayor, so it is our plan, assuming that council approves of the direction, that we would start reaching out to the veterans groups, identify who that advisory panel will be, and then start having meetings. And absolutely, one of our topics will be, okay, what can we do to improve the existing veterans park so you feel like it's a more acceptable and worthy location, and weighing some of the requests or recommendations with what is an ongoing appropriate investment as opposed to something that would be specific to a park only if it's stayed there. Okay, and so we would have to consider those things, but certainly, it was our intention when we first brought this to you that we were working with those groups to try to identify the improvements that would be made after we remove the concrete structure. And so we still intend to do that. It just might look a little bit different until we decide for sure what the location will be in the future.
Okay, so you have all the contact information. I'm concerned that you've got some contact information, but maybe not for the gentlemen that are here today, possibly.
Mayor, absolutely. We have some, I think, a pretty good, robust contact list, but anybody is welcome to submit, leave cards, leave names. They can email me directly, blopez@casperwy.gov, and I will make sure that they get added to a contact list.
Did you guys hear that? Okay. So we have a direction requested. Everybody in favor? Moving on to Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant.
Pro Tem, so this is a good, I believe, but expedited discussion that we need to have regarding our potential acceptance of Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant. So back in November of 2023, council gave us approval to submit for up to three grants to the Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant Program. We did follow through with those applications and were notified very recently that we were awarded all three of those grants. And so it's very exciting. However, because the funds were originally derived from ARPA, we have to have them dedicated quite quickly. And so we were told by the state last week that we needed to formally accept these grants and be able to execute our award contracts by the 10th of October, or the money may be returned to the Fed. And so that is why we needed to call the special meeting this evening, but we wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to refresh your memory on what these projects were and that you're in support of accepting the grants. I did provide a summary document for you all, just to summarize the total project cost of each project, what the grant share would be of those projects, what the city cash match would be, what our city in-kind match would be, and then other contributions would be private donations or non-federal grant funds that could be utilized as match. And so hopefully you can see that we're talking about almost $9 million worth of projects to be constructed. And that 8,005,000 of that is covered by the grants. And so really only about a 7% investment in city funds to build these projects. I also want to emphasize one very unique aspect of this grant is that only qualified census tract projects could be submitted for consideration. And so we only have one qualified census tract in Casper, and that is in the North Casper area. So we were very limited to the area of town that we could even apply for funds for. Thankfully, we had already identified some significant needs within that census tract. And so we had projects that we could propose and had advanced budget planning and things already ongoing, which gave us the opportunity to apply for these one-time dollars. And again, are really excited for the opportunity to get such significant awards that are really transformational for that part in our community. So with that, I would request your direction. And if you approve, then of course the special meeting would need to take place so that you could formally accept the grants.
Okay, all in favor to accept these grants? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Did you have a question? No.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think this is great. What is a pump track? Sorry.
Mayor, counselor, so a pump track is made for bicycles, scooters, can even be used on skateboards, but the particular one that we are proposing is made of a polyurethane material. Sometimes they're asphalt, sometimes they're dirt, but it is generally a circular formed track with rolling hills where kids could, or adults can learn to mountain bike, just ride their bikes. It's kind of a safe starter for mountain biking and other wheeled activities.
Thank you for indulging my ignorance.
Councilor Pollak?
I don't have any questions. I just think that 7% match from the city is unreal. So nice work getting this
Yeah.
put together. It's incredible. And I love to see so much happening for North Casper. That'll be really major to add some energy there and provide some amenities. Love it.
Councilor Pacheco?
Yeah, I don't have a question or anything, just other than recognizing the leverage this presents. As having this type of a grant, kind of like what Amber said, and this is something that I think we need to recognize this large of amount of to help, create the type of improvements that we're going to need. And so I certainly hope that the community sees that we're working towards that. 7% out of our pocket is incredible for the amount of work that we're doing. So bravo to you guys.
Councilor Campbell?
Mayor Pro Tem, and yeah, in agreement with the other comments. I've seen a lot of chatter, especially in regard to the specific purpose tax proposals on the ballot next month. A lot of feedback is, well, shouldn't the city, can we find grants, think of alternative funding mechanisms, and this is a great illustration of the amazing work city staff does in finding and utilizing those sorts of grants. As mentioned, very, very small match for us to get an enormous investment. So I would say this is a great example in response to a lot of that feedback we got about city staff doing an amazing job finding those alternative funding sources. My only question with the installation and creation of a new metal skate park at Marion Kreiner, I'm just curious what would happen to the current concrete one. Does it stay as part of the inventory and it just we just stop investing in it? Is it, well, actually, I apologize. Part of this was repurposing the park. And so I guess that's my question. Is it a full demo or is it like a repurposing it? I'm just kind of curious to learn more about what we do with the current concrete.
Counselor, so as planned, as proposed for our applications, the concrete skate park would be completely decommissioned. So the metal skate park would be built in Marion Kreiner. And then after that park is built and ready to be utilized, we would completely decommission concrete skate park by the Boys and Girls Club and repurpose that as a miracle field. For those of you not familiar with what a miracle field is, that is an ADA accessible playing surface so that people with disabilities can enjoy sports, baseball, softball, even other things such as soccer, football. So it's a completely ADA accessible playing field for people with disabilities. And in fact, in places like Colorado, they actually have leagues, and then people travel to play sports on those fields. And we really feel like it's a very synergetic location, given its proximity to the Boys and Girls Club and Lincoln School. In addition to that, the concrete skate park, of course, is not in great shape. We get criticized quite often about the condition of the park, and while through a very generous donation from our Rotary Club, we tried to improve the condition of that park. It just didn't really get us where we needed to be, and professional skate park builders have said they feel like we would need to tear it down and start over. And given the problems that we have because of how far tucked away it is from the road, and just visibility isn't really good, and so we get a lot of graffiti. There's a lot of there's a lot of drawbacks to having it located where it's at, as opposed to repurposing the land as a miracle field. But for those concerned that there's not an equal amenity, we currently have a project thanks to a grant when we partnered with the Central Wyoming Trails Alliance. They also received an outdoor grant for planning an all-wheels park in Mike Cedar. And that would include a new big concrete skate park. So there's a future plan to have a similar amenity in a different location while still serving North Casper with, a beginner to intermediate skate park, closer to other rec amenities, really kind of creating this cool hub of activity for people in that.
Thank you. Follow-up, thank you for the plug for the All Wheels Park. I believe there's a survey period open right now, so I would encourage folks to complete that survey and give your input in regards to that project. The current existing concrete park, I guess, I was having a hard time imagining it in my head when I read this repurposing of Miracle Field, because it didn't seem like it was big enough. But the concrete park, is that just one small portion of a larger city parcel? Okay, it looks like there's, okay.
So there's adjacent school district land and city land. And so we would likely partner with the district. But the footprint of a miracle field is much smaller than, a traditional athletic field. And so the footprint of the skate park as it exists today is about 14,000 square feet. That's about, hold me to that, but a miracle field is almost identical size of the footprint of the existing skate park.
Interesting.
And that is actually, if you want a visual of it, you can go to the Parks and Rec Master Plan and look at the Field of Dreams or the North Casper Athletic Complex concept, and it shows the miracle field there, because this was already in progress and we had been notified that we were going to be awarded the funds in time to get that included.
Thank you. And then last follow-up, if I could. I know you mentioned the graffiti and the lack of visibility. It's pretty far removed from the street. So I guess I'm still wondering about whether we'll still have those issues in the future. I'm curious, have we spoken with Boys and Girls Club leadership about this project? And I guess I would just love to see more buy-in, a little bit more collaboration, since it is kind of in their backyard. Number one, making sure it's a resource that maybe they could use in their programming and stuff, and they could help feed users to it. But also, if there's any way we can help get some shared oversight of the area, if it feels like they have a vested interest in helping us keep an eye out on the area. I'm just curious what sort of conversation, if any, we've had with them on it.
Your Honor, Counselor. So we have had conversations with the Boys and Girls Club, and in fact, they wrote a letter of support for our grant application. So they are well aware of what our future plan is. And I think it's probably appropriate for me to say that they appreciate the proposed land use more than the existing land use. just because of the challenges that it causes for us. So they are in support. They wrote the letter of support, and I think they're going to be really excited. We do believe there's some opportunity for them to utilize that space for some programming. I mean, they currently lease city space for T-ball and things like that. Those can easily take place on a Miracle Field. But again, we see some synergetic opportunities with the school district as well. There's a playground adjacent that we feel like could be upgraded in the future to be an accessible playground. But even if not, Wells Park is a fully accessible playground that's just across the street in North Casper. So there's just a lot of good dynamics there in that area. Plus, you always want your Miracle amenities to be located close to similar uses, right? So having a baseball field for people with disabilities close to our youth baseball complex and our softball complex makes a lot of sense, because then you've got people in the community coming together to enjoy the sports that they love, and we're not segregating those with disabilities to an isolated area that doesn't make sense. So again, really great use of the property, we believe. And back to the collaboration piece. So when we submitted the grants, we had letters of support from the Trona County Outdoor Rec Collaborative. We had letters of support from 307 Skate Park. And in fact, when we designed the concepts for the Marion Kreiner Skate Park, Copper and her group were involved in providing feedback to the consultant for what the design of that skate park and pump track would look like. So it has been collaborative. We've worked with the youth baseball and softball groups to talk about what improvements are needed. I mean, one of the major investments will be an infield material for Field of Dreams, just upgrading that complex. Even Casper Soccer Club submitted, a letter of support because we're providing some netting in conjunction with the 1 cent funding that council was gracious enough to give them. We will be able to establish the netting that protects players for both sports. And so a lot of collaboration. I'm happy to provide a list or the letters themselves of support that were obtained when we applied for the grants, if you're interested in seeing that.
I personally would love to see it. Share it where applicable.
Happy to do that.
Counselor Sullivan.
Thank you. I missed the time frame. Is everything for next year, or when? I know the 10th is a cutoff for funding, but what's the time frame for development?
Mayor, Counselor, so once the contracts are executed, we can start working immediately.
Okay.
As part of budget amendment number 1, you gave us the spending authority for all of these projects. And so we're ready to roll as soon as the contracts are signed.
I think it's great.
Any other questions? So I guess we're going to be moving forward in the special sessions to approve.
Mayor, if I may, I think we can go ahead and hit the last 2 topics of the work session and then do the
Right.
formal meeting.
So we're on agenda review now. Do you have anything, acting city manager, for agenda review?
Your grid is located in your packet. Always we would accept any feedback in terms of adding items that you would like to see on the last page consideration.
And then we're gonna do council around the table.
we-
Yep, go ahead.
Just a question, did we get the Trevitt rezoning, did we get that on here for? We were talking about, I think, the second meeting in November. Sorry,
22nd.
Second.
October 22nd. Oh, but were we saying though that we would take it up at a public meeting at the?
Sometime in November. November, it's the second meeting in November.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
19th.
Yeah.
Go that far out?
See that. I don't see it on this. And then 18.
That's what it's not, we'll get it done.
Okay. And then the 5th 22nd for the work session. Zone change, yeah, okay, thank you.
Counselor Pollock, we'll start with you.
I do not have any updates for today, other than I did make it to most of the Foreigner concert, after last week's meeting. I only missed the opener, so, they're just doing a great job up there. I've been to a few shows lately and, really had a great time. I have Amoco reuse agreement meeting this week, so I'll give you an update for that. And regional water, at the next meeting.
Counselor Bond?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I attended the silent vigil ceremony on Sunday at the Tate Pump House for domestic violence. Silent vigil was well attended. See, the county attorney Dan Itzen gave a few comments at the event and was very articulate in terms of expressing, you know, the situation that, you know, while we've made a lot of progress and he felt in our community, I think he's right there. I mean, in terms of the resources available for victims of domestic violence, the cooperation and coordination with law enforcement, and just I think he was saying that kind of just the number instead of having a stacked docket full of domestic violence cases there, it's gotten a little bit more manageable, which is hard to say whether it's a reduction in actual events or whether there truly is a decline. But I felt like, and I think his other point was that, you know, it is still, it's not gone. Domestic violence is still very much an issue in our community, and that it's something that we all as a community need to make an effort to address. And I think it fits with our, you know, work on mental health and so forth. He also urged, I think, all of us to be mindful of the awareness that we keep around domestic violence for not only in government, but I think in the media, that, you know, the media is oftentimes quick to highlight, you know, violent crime, domestic violence and so forth, but to actually articulate and to bring about awareness about the impact on victims and what we do about that. You know, that's a challenge, I think, in our community. And then I last night attended the court liaison meeting with our two municipal judges. They were just kind of a problem-solving meeting, and we talked a little bit about the challenges they're facing with the numbers of homeless individuals who they're encountering in the city courts, who have, you know, they're not able to pay fines. They're concerned about the conundrum they're in with fines versus jail time, and would really be open to some support from council as far as alternatives to, you know, what would be more helpful, what would be more impactful, if you will, on addressing the swinging door effect of those with, you know, homeless individuals, unhoused individuals coming before the court, and just going right back out and coming right back in, and it's kind of a revolving door. So we'll be very open to. They had some ideas that I will share with council, but they're, you know, they're looking for answers, I think, and addressing that challenge. So that was all. Thank you.
I don't have anything, but I have a rec board meeting on Friday. I'm not sure if the city's been invited to that, so yeah, hopefully. But we'll be actually reviewing some grants and things like that the city has put in for that as well. Washington Park, yeah. And so, I will be at that. I will give you an update next week about that board meeting.
Counselor Haskins.
I don't have anything yet. I received a phone call from someone here in town that has expressed that a large number of patients that attend Lost Springs clinics are feeling harassed and endangered. They wanted to know if there's something we could do. I haven't talked to her to see what their ideas are yet, but with Dr. Vigneri's passing, they are getting more of those patients that are just normal patients needing medical care. So I'm gonna meet with them and then see if I want to see if maybe we can put that on a work session, but it's a little preemptive.
Can I just get a clarification? So they're going for just general
Yeah.
healthcare for
Turns out somewhere They
OBGYN,
just need to see doctors.
and they're feeling like going in and they're,
And I
Being judged.
actually the call I got was from an escort, because every patient that goes there now has to be escorted in due to the protesters. And she is now afraid
Okay.
and wanting to know if we can help, so. Yeah, once I get a little more information, I'll bring it and see if there's a work session item for something that we can actually offer to help.
Counselor Gamma.
Thanks. I don't have anything. I spent all last week in Florida and I appreciate y'all letting me in the meeting despite protests, but it was Animal Kingdom Day, so they closed the park early. I cleared it through the wide. We're Jay. But I appreciated y'all letting me join remotely. I had an amazing time, very magical. I'm so glad to be back. Wasn't my highest point, but I'm so glad to be back here. The weather was absolutely miserable. My heart does go out to everyone getting battered by hurricanes over there, but holy smokes, I could not live in that. It was so hot. It's the hottest I've ever been in my life. So very glad to be back here. But thanks for all entertaining me online and appreciate it.
I didn't know about the survey out about the All Wheels Park. So I just was quickly Googling because my tiny 6-year-old wants to be a skateboarder. So it was a little bit hard to find that survey and I figured I could just mention it. Is it on our city website somewhere?
Not yet.
No.
It's coming.
Okay, cool.
We're working on a press release.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Well, it's on, Reds. That's where I found it. But it's the AmericanRampCompany.com. It looks like it pops up
Central Wyoming Trails Alliance has it on their Facebook.
on my Facebook too. So yeah, I guess, I mean, there were a lot of questions on there that I didn't understand any of the terminology, but that's exciting. Good to know. I don't have any meetings, and I won't be here next Tuesday, so I won't be in Disney World.
No,
I
that's too bad.
still won't be here.
I have supposed to have a Parks and Rec meeting on Thursday. I am not gonna be able to attend. So I know you guys are gonna be super disappointed, but, that's all that I have. So we're going to adjourn this meeting and then if you guys are okay, we're gonna roll straight into the special council meeting.
We might, so it's a special meeting, not an executive
It's
session.
not executive session, so. Okay, I now call the October 8th, 2024 special council meeting to order. The chair would entertain a motion by minute action to excuse the absence of Mayor Kathy.
So moved.
And do we want to excuse
Yes.
Councilor Jensen?
And Counselor Jensen.
So moved again.
Second.
All voting aye?
Aye.
All voting nay? Please record the vote.
With all counselors voting aye, the motion passes.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please read the consent resolutions by title only.
2A1, authorizing acceptance of Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Grant funds from the State of Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources for the North Casper Athletics and Recreation Complex improvements. 282, authorizing acceptance of Wyoming outdoor recreation grant funds from the State of Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources for the North Platte River Pedestrian Bridge Project. And 283, a resolution authorizing acceptance of Wyoming outdoor recreation grant funds from the State of Wyoming Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources for the Marion Steiner Pool and Parking.
The chair would entertain a motion to adopt the resolutions just read.
So moved.
Second.
All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all councilors voting aye, the motion passes.
Chair would now like to entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting. So moved.
Second.
Any abstentions? Nay votes? All voting aye.
Aye.
Please record the vote.
With all councilors voting aye, the motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned. Well, your glasses, please, make them black.
Oh,
This is to make you feel better that you're going wrong and you can't see.
and some type of athletic. Genius.
Like, no, I'm not, I'm an Iron Man.
I'm not. Like gang eyes. It's like literally for like the last 2 years, especially the last two, my eyes are just like, I can't see close up.
Well,
Yeah,
mine
yeah.
have mono, and I'm sure they have.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I only have one eye that reads, only one eye that sees far away. And so,
I do wear glasses. Yeah, I have contacts. So, but if I wore my glasses, then I take them off.
Yeah,
And I have to look at my